For decades, the name David Phelps has stood as a towering symbol of excellence in gospel music. With a voice that could move mountains and a soul deeply rooted in faith, he wasn't just a singer, he was an experience. From grand stages to quiet church pews, David's voice became a beacon of hope, a sound that touched millions and stirred hearts across the world. He was more than talent. He was passion. A boy with a dream who grew into a powerhouse vocalist, delivering every note with raw emotion and conviction. When David Phelps joined the Gaither vocal band, everything changed. His soaring tenor became the very soul of the group. Whether lifting spirits with a triumphant anthem or moving listeners to tears with a humble hymn, his voice had a way of reaching people where they needed it most. But his gift was never just about performance, it was about connection. Every lyric felt personal, every show like a conversation between hearts. Fans felt like he was singing to them, about them, their pain, their faith, their joy. Outside of the Gaither stage, David's solo career flourished. Albums like Life is a Church and Freedom proved his artistry went beyond gospel norms. He was a storyteller, a bridge between scripture and sound, tradition and innovation. His music wasn't just heard, it was felt. His concerts were more than shows. They were worship, reflection, celebration. Fans admired him not only for his vocal strength but also for his quiet humility. Despite fame, David never lost sight of what mattered. He spoke openly about his love for his wife, his children, and the simple peace of home life. While others chased the spotlight, David remained grounded in faith and family. But behind the standing ovations, something was happening. Something even his closest fans couldn't see. Behind the scenes, David was struggling. Years of touring, pressure, and the demands of a public life began to take their toll. At first, it was subtle, fatigue, missed rehearsals, needing longer breaks. But it wasn't just exhaustion from the road. There was a heaviness he couldn't shake. Backstage, he'd sit quietly, rubbing his temples. His energy, once boundless, began to fade. The vibrant performer so many adored now looked weary between songs. And then, the voice. His voice. The very thing that made him a legend began to falter. During rehearsals, he would stop mid-note, clearing his throat, shaking his head. Something was wrong. His perfectionism brushed it off as allergies or stress. But those closest to him saw what he tried to hide. He was struggling, and it wasn't going away. Soon came the cancellations. At first, a few shows. His team issued vague statements, scheduling conflicts, unforeseen circumstances. But whispers began to spread. Was he sick? Was it burnout? Was David Phelps stepping away? His once active social media turned quiet. Friends grew concerned. Fans waited for answers. But David smiled through it all, reassuring everyone with a gentle, "I'm just taking it easy. Nothing to worry about." But there was something to worry about. And then, it happened. At a private event, surrounded by close friends and longtime supporters, David took the stage. He greeted the room with that familiar warmth. But something was different. There was no flash. No grand entrance. Just David. Vulnerable. He took a deep breath. "For the past few months," he began, "I've been facing a challenge I never imagined." The room fell silent. "I've been dealing with a health condition that has affected my energy, my ability to perform, even my voice." He didn't share every medical detail, but what he said was enough to leave the crowd shaken. Whether it was a vocal disorder, a neurological condition, or something even more serious, one thing was clear. David Phelps, the voice that had carried so many, now needed support of his own. Tears filled the eyes of those in the room. Quiet sobs. Fans and friends watched as the man who had lifted their spirits for so long now stood before them, unsure of what the future would hold. "For years," he said softly, "my voice has been my gift, my calling. But lately, I've had to face the possibility that I might not always be able to share it like I used to." He paused, looked around the room. "I don't know what the future holds," he continued, "but I do know this: my faith is stronger than ever. And I trust that God has a plan, whether I'm on the stage or off it." There was no music, no performance, just a man, brave, honest, and broken, but not defeated. And in that moment, David Phelps wasn't just a gospel icon. He was a human being. A husband. A father. A believer. Word of his revelations spread like wildfire. Across the globe, fans flooded social media with prayers and love. Gospel artists, celebrities, and people from all walks of life shared memories, videos, and emotional tributes. Not just to the singer, but to the man who had inspired so many. Tour dates were canceled. Tickets refunded. The stage that once echoed his voice fell silent. And for the first time in decades, David Phelps stepped away from the spotlight. But he wasn't alone. His wife, his children, his faith, they became his foundation. In the quiet moments at home, in the spaces where no microphone reached, David began a new journey, one not filled with applause, but with healing. And though we don't know what tomorrow holds for David Phelps, one thing remains true. For years, David Phelps had been a beacon of light in gospel music, a voice that moved mountains, stirred hearts, and lifted spirits. But behind the soaring vocals and standing ovations, no one could have predicted the storm that was about to shake the foundation of everything he had built. Though David had always prioritized his faith and family, life suddenly forced him to slow down, more than he ever had before. Something had changed. Health concerns emerged, ones that couldn't be ignored. And just like that, the spotlight dimmed. The stage fell silent. David Phelps disappeared from public view. He spent his days at home, surrounded by those who mattered most. And in that stillness, he began to reflect, not just on his career, but on his purpose. Where was God leading him now? What did this unexpected pause mean? Whispers began to circulate in the music world. Some close to David believed this was temporary, that after recovery he would rise again, stronger than ever. But others weren't so sure. Had we already witnessed the final chapter of a once-in-a-generation voice? Music executives, longtime collaborators, even fellow artists were left in limbo. Could David continue recording if live performances were no longer possible? Would his voice return to its full strength? Or would he find new ways to pour his gift into the world, through songwriting, producing, or perhaps mentoring the next generation of gospel voices? Questions hung in the air like smoke. But there were no answers, not yet. Not even from David himself. One thing, however, never wavered: his faith. In a deeply personal letter shared online, David broke his silence. He thanked his fans for their love, their prayers, their patience. And with raw honesty he wrote, "Even in this difficult season, I know God is guiding my path. My voice may rest, but my message will never fade." It wasn't just about singing. It never had been. It was about the connection, the message, the spirit behind every note. Weeks turned into months. Still, no public appearances. No performances. Just silence, and the growing ache of uncertainty among his fans. Would he ever return? Or had he already decided to walk away from the stage for good? Some feared the worst. Others clung to hope, praying for a miracle. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. An unassuming message appeared on David's official social media pages. No fanfare. No explanation. Just a simple post. "I have something to share with you all. Join me this Sunday." Those words ignited a firestorm of speculation. Was this his final goodbye? Or the moment his faithful followers had been waiting for? The anticipation was electric. When Sunday arrived, thousands of fans across the world tuned into the live stream. Hearts pounded. Eyes watched the screen in breathless silence. And then, it faded in. There he was, David Phelps. Sitting in a warmly lit studio, eyes gentle, expression peaceful, changed, somehow. There was wisdom in his gaze. A kind of quiet strength that only comes from walking through the fire and coming out the other side. He took a deep breath. And then he spoke. "These past months have been the hardest of my life. I've faced challenges I never expected. There were days I wasn't sure if I'd ever sing again. But through it all, God never left my side." The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. He spoke of the doubt, the fear, the moments he questioned everything. But then, he gave the world the answer it had been praying for. I'm not done yet. Relief washed over the audience like a wave. Tears welled up. Smiles spread. David Phelps, still standing, still fighting, still singing. He explained that while the road ahead might look different, fewer live shows, more time at home, his voice wasn't going anywhere. His purpose was alive and well. And then, as if to prove it, he reached for the microphone. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and sang. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, but then, like a spark catching fire, his voice soared. Unbreakable. It wasn't just a performance. It was a declaration, a testimony of grace, of resilience, of the unshakable power of faith. People watching from living rooms and phones around the world wept, not just because of the beauty of the song, but because they knew what it meant. David Phelps had given them more than music. He had given them hope. And whether this moment marked a triumphant return or a poignant farewell, one truth could not be denied.